I'm a sucker for sci-fi and dystopia. Put them together and you've got me sold. But the problem with those popular genres is that they become overdone very quickly. And whether or not they begin with a cliched story, eventually those tropes start to fill in any plot holes. Nuclear winters, zombies, dictatorships, airborne viruses, we've seen them all, often more than once. I mean, hell, you may have even lived through a couple at this point. However, in a welcome change of pace, Horizon Zero Dawn asks a question from the moment its universe is revealed. How did the world wind up the way it is? That may not be explicitly asked, and discovering the answer may not even be your main objective in the game, but it sparks curiosity and intrigue from the player. The uncertainty of the character, presented from the very first moment this game was announced, draws out an urge to know and understand. As you begin to play the game, you'll start asking even more questions on your own. Why was Aloy outcast at birth? Why is Rost the one in charge of her? Why would he give up his place in society, or was he already banished as well? And the questions by no means focus all around Aloy, but also around the world, with the obvious one being, what happened to the people of the past? But also questions on the current state of things, such as, if the ancient humans who made the machines are long gone, then how are there new machines popping up every few years? And why are the machines getting angrier? There are so many questions about this world and these characters, and the fact that you can quickly think up all these questions means that they have answers waiting for you, somewhere out there in this wild world of ancient robots and future tribes. If interesting worlds full of interesting stories are your thing, then you may want to figure out what's so great about Horizon Zero Dawn. Something that has always bothered me personally is how stagnant open-world games can be. Sure, the town squares are bustling and caves are filled to the brim with goblins and draugrs, but out and about in the world, in the hills, the forests, the canyons, there's almost nobody. I get why that is, considering technical limitations that we may eventually break away from, but in the meantime, it seems odd that in this fantastical, adventure-worthy world there aren't more people out taking advantage of it. And Horizon doesn't have more people adventuring on their own by any means, but instead it actually has an explanation, a little piece of world building that provides an excuse for such a technical limitation. The restrictive and almost barbaric traditions and laws of this tribal world actually make sense in terms of why the NPCs are all huddled in camps, while you're free to be the only person exploring ruins and the deep wilds. Having been cast out at birth, it also makes sense as to why Aloy is comfortable traveling on her own for extended periods of time. Many main characters that come from relatively normal human backgrounds would slowly start to feel the weight from being away from their loved ones or just society as a whole. But for an outsider who was never given the luxuries of community and friendship, being in the wilds on her own is no different than how Aloy was raised. During the prologue, you're given the opportunity to explore some of these ruins of the metal world through the eyes of a child, someone who approximately has the same amount of information as the player in terms of what happened to the world, and that amount is probably close to zero. Aloy is curious about these ruins and the piece of technology that she finds because she's not completely a part of the established modern world and its tribal societies. She's an outcast, and without being fully indoctrinated into their way of life, she doesn't feel the same impulse to run away from anything reminiscent of those who came before. If you listen to all of the audio logs in these metal ruins, you can assume something bad happened, possibly led by this Director Evans, that was a death sentence to whoever lived or worked down here. You even have a timestamp on one of the recordings for New Year's Day 2066, and so the constant balance of questions and answers begins. This game is all about the questions. A great story often brings the audience along and involves them in the discoveries made along the way. Audiences don't often enjoy the feeling of just being taken along for the ride. They want to see the development. More often than that, they want the feeling of piecing together the answers themselves. The pace of this story allows the player to enjoy coming up with their own hypotheses as to what has happened and what will happen. There's also enough time between any new major pieces of information that if your original theory was wrong, you can enjoy developing your next idea in your head as you continue towards the sight of more evidence. Then, with each new clue, the player receives either the satisfaction of knowing they guessed something correctly, or the surprise of being given an unexpected piece of information. Oddly enough, your main character is the secondary storyline. It's pretty obvious why people expect the cover to be the focus of the story. I mean, look at the game's cover art. What do you see? Aloy, robots, future dystopia, tribal society? If this game followed the aspects of the majority of the gaming world's market, then yes, that's all that would be in the game. But that is literally judging a book by its cover. I have come across too many people who stopped playing because they thought the story was boring. That would be understandable in most cases. If you feel you have truly given something a chance and it just plainly does not interest you, then by all means don't feel the need to waste your time on it. But stick with me, because when I ask them how far they made it, on multiple accounts I discover they hardly left the tutorial area. The draw of this game isn't what's happening to Aloy, it's what already happened to the planet and humanity as a whole. Why things are the way they are. Now, here's the obvious counter-argument: why do people need to wait to get to the interesting part? Fair enough. If I may be blunt, that's a very shallow approach to any story. I'm not saying you should watch multiple seasons and several dozen episodes of a TV show just to see one cool villain or a big twist that comes in later. I'm just saying try to give at least a few hours of your attention to a game which you go into knowing that it's supposed to take slightly longer to tell its story than many standard adventure games. I mean, even single-player games that are considered to be relatively short these days are still around 10 to 14 hours on average, and you wouldn't expect to absorb the juiciest parts of the experience in the first half. That's like opening the first book of Harry Potter and saying, it's just some kid that lives under the stairs. That's not very interesting. Well, obviously, it's not very interesting yet, because you haven't actually experienced the story. Exposition is often necessary, especially when establishing a fictional world. What's more than that, everyone loves a good reveal or a twist, or to at least discover some of the greater aspects of the story on their own. Pacing is important. If they lay out every fact about the world and where it's been and where it's going, then there's nothing to discover, which is kind of important about a faction of antiquated, tribalistic humans who know little to nothing about where they came from. In this instance, you have to be put in their shoes. Even when the trailer for the game was released, nothing was revealed other than, at some point in the future, humanity suffered great losses and reverted to a primal state. Yet, somehow, giant mechanical creatures now top the food chain. Well, how did we get there? You'll have to find out by playing the game, and I'm sorry to say, but you're not going to discover all of that in the first couple hours. As to why you should even pay attention at first, it's because of how comfortable and straightforward this secondary storyline is that you're playing. Look, she may not be the reason behind every secret of the world, but Aloy is fun to play as. She's cute, she's tough, the role is very well performed, and she has an understandable plight as an outsider, a common trope in video games. She's the perfect little appetizer for the world you're soon to enter. Aloy is an excellent vehicle for discovery and storytelling. She is on a mission to learn more about who she is, and along the way, you use this vehicle to find the answers to your own questions as a player. You don't have to care about the things she cares about, but you're given the opportunity. You only get these little bites of sustenance when it comes to information about the past, and each tiny piece is enough nutrition to keep you moving and hooked as you continue forward, getting bigger and bigger pieces of sci-fi breadcrumbs. Yes, you have to wait for later in the game for the real meat of the story to come out, but that's how storytelling works. That's when it becomes scary, sad, beautiful, unsettling, and more confusing than ever. Even discovering what the title means is exciting. I mean, Horizon Zero Dawn? That's not a phrase we've ever heard before. Nothing about those words even combine to make sense. So, learning the origins of both your character and your world are fantastic journeys that require a little bit of patience, as any good story would, in real life, in a book, in a movie, or in a video game. Not too long ago, a popular internet comic artist by the name of Senor Grafo posted his review of Horizon Zero Dawn on Reddit, claiming that he gave up on the main quest because they should have followed more of a show-don't-tell approach in their storytelling. But here's the thing, the showing and telling are both present in separate aspects of Aloy's world. For the very start of the story, we're returning to the roots of humanity, back to a wood, stone, and fire level of primitive technology, where the only knowledge to be found is through word of mouth, literally telling. That's part of the universe building. That's a very important thing in world building, saying this is the way things are, and then abiding by those rules. Otherwise, a story flies off the rails with infinite possibilities. And whether your character fits this world or breaks the mold a little bit comes later. But if you had to go discover every single aspect of the world around you on your own, you'd be confused as to why every other human you interact with is a bumbling, oblivious, sheltered husk of a person that doesn't dare to ask questions. In fact, the most redeemable and enjoyable side characters are often the ones who accept Aloy despite her outcast circumstances, and maybe don't even believe in these ritualistic traditions in the first place. They also want to learn and grow, for one reason or another. So there's your telling. Now what about the showing? Well, the showing of storytelling comes from when Aloy breaks the aforementioned mold. You have to go out, fight the monsters, save the day like a big prehistoric future hero, and most importantly, discover why things are the way they are, which is something that no one else could possibly tell you because they have no clue. They're busy living in a sheltered world of tradition, which motivates us, as modern human players, to leave, because we do what every modern person does, we seek information. That doesn't mean this game is a cut and dry school lesson, but that learning is actually fun when it's in regards to something you find interesting. The pace of uncovering the world of the past could have been a little faster if it were the only story that Guerrilla Games wanted to tell. But since Aloy is uncovering this story, and she is at first also caught up in the way of the world as she knows it, then we're going to have to take what we can get at first, such as the birthday recording in the prologue cave and the flashes of the woman from the past, before Aloy arrives at the front steps of a much larger world. Once the world opens up, so do the opportunities for storytelling in both the past and present. Shortly after you leave the starting area of the Blessed Nora lands, you'll be quickly introduced to other types of optional objectives throughout the world, including hunting ground trials and bandit camp raids that all teach you about these different cultures and tribes that now inhabit this region of what used to be the United States. As for the past, you have the cauldrons, the Apaka Shitstorm tour, and every little pre-recorded video and audio clip that unravels the fates of so many people who lived during the time of whatever events caused the world to be what it is. If you've already played the game once before, I may suggest that you at least play the first half again, as rediscovering the true underlying subtext of some of these early game recordings really carries a completely different weight when you understand what these people were going through. And if you haven't played yet, whether you're a completionist type or not, I hope you do take the time to listen through as many of the leftover audio clips as you can, because discovering this story really is worth every moment you spend in this cool, chaotic world. Now that we've covered exploration of the game, let's just go over what a well-crafted world you're going to be traversing. Due to the nature of this game's apocalypse, we aren't stuck in some sort of nuclear winter-ridden wasteland. Nature has started returning to human structures, but there are still vastly varied landscapes. There are tundras, canyons, mountains, forests, and you can experience all of them at day, night, during an amazing sunset, or an overcast rainy day. Even passing through the same region of the world repeatedly may look entirely different depending on when you arrive, what the weather's like, and which direction you're approaching from. The machines are a great form of wildlife, predator, and natural danger. These once docile beings, crafted by the ones who came before, are now, for some reason, becoming more and more agitated to a dangerous point. The primal humans of Horizon's world are still a part of the food chain, and the creatures above them are metal terrors modeled after bulls, crocodiles, and Tyrannosaurus rexes. They're all somewhere between interesting, majestic, and terrifying. Discovering a new species of machine is always entertaining, as long as you're not being chased by them, because it's fun to watch how they move and how they're modeled after their real-life Animal Kingdom counterpart. The machines will also move and attack with obvious inspiration from their historic twins, such as the Strider bucking and kicking with its back legs, just as a wild horse might. I also enjoy the fact that due to the machines being made of individual parts, you have the chance to knock off those parts in battle, and whether or not that causes the machines to chase you down or run away, you can still collect the pieces that have been knocked off. Speaking of these metal beings and the pieces they're composed of, the clothing and architecture of the current human race is an excellent composite design, which embraces the nature that they know, combining the hides and body parts of living creatures and wires and metal from the machines that now roam the land, such as using cables and wires as rope. Even for those who bought the game just to shoot robot dinosaurs with a bow and arrow, there is still plenty to discover without entering any story-related cavern or town. The world is ready to receive its players in whichever capacity fascinates them the most. One thing that's very enjoyable about witnessing this story as it unravels is the pace and subtlety in its storytelling. The story of Horizon Zero Dawn is brilliantly written, and it's exciting to uncover the next bit of information, especially if you're consuming all sorts of data passed your way, such as audio tapes and even contextual geography. The forms of conflict demonstrated throughout this journey really keep things fresh. So many action-adventure games can really have their conflicts reduced to character versus character or character versus society, with the climax boiling down to two angry men waving guns at each other as they argue over whose ideals are more righteous or powerful. However, Horizon Zero Dawn covers conflicts of almost every literary form, with strong focus on character versus technology, nature, and fate. An important point to keep in mind is that we're experiencing two stories at once, not just a single story with some flashbacks or diary pages strewn about. We're unfolding a story from the past, featuring a different cast of characters in a different, long-gone setting. A story with a climax that has already passed, and possibly its resolution too. Meanwhile, we have a new story in front of us that is affected by the past as completely isolated events from long ago begin to influence a future yet to be understood. Both of these stories can be unraveled at the pace of the player, whether or not they want to charge right through enemy strongholds in search of the truth, or see the sights and venture to every corner of the world utilizing their newfound freedom. That is what's so great about Horizon Zero Dawn. Thank you all for joining us on this episode of What's So Great About Gaming, as we traversed the wilds of Horizon Zero Dawn. I'd like to thank Ganondork for suggesting this game. Make sure to tell us what you think about Horizon, or even suggest a game for another video. If you want to hear what's great about another game, check out the link to our last episode, Luigi's Mansion, on screen or in the description. And please take the time to subscribe to be involved in the discussions here. Thanks again for watching. Now go play a great game. We'll see you next time.